Hey everyone, it's Louisa Tanner-Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I'm here to talk about the North Node. Now, for those of you that follow astrology, you might have heard about the North Node. It's kind of like, I always think of it like a button that, or a pointer or an arrow that is showing where humanity needs to be heading. It's really handy. You know, the North Node is always in opposition to the South Node. They're like a pair of opposites. And I see them as like compass points, almost like North and South, i.e. like North Node and South Node. And like the North Node is pointing humanity in a direction of where we need to be going. You know, what do we need to be focusing on? And then the South Node is showing us what we're moving away from. And so it's really, really quite helpful when you look at astrology from the perspective of where the North Node and South Node have just been, to where they're just going and to where they're going to be going after that, to get a real kind of conscious stream of where humanity is going. I've always found it really helpful. And you can always use the North Node and South Node in your own charts to see where life is making you focus and where it's making you focus less on. So as I start this session, I just want to say thank you to anyone who listens in live, and also many, many thanks to all of my re-listeners, because your support means so much to me. I absolutely adore it. And I don't know whether you're listening to this on Facebook, on the Daily Uplift Forecast page, on YouTube, or on the Feel Good Astrology podcast. Wherever you're viewing this from or listening to us from, I'm really, really grateful for your support and for any shares or, you know, anyone you connect me up with from this. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to drop me a question about this as well, if you're listening in live, you can do it by literally going to the Daily Uplift Forecast page and then keying in your question, or you can always drop me a message. It's louisa@feelgoodastrology.com, and I will happily answer any questions that you have. It might not be today, but I'll do it just as soon as I can. So let's have a look at the North Node then. So right now, the North Node is in the last few moments in the sign of Cancer, and the South Node is in the sign of Capricorn for its last, I say few moments, we're talking literally a couple of weeks. In 2 weeks, they'll have shifted signs. Now, during this time, the South Node in Capricorn has been indicating to us, like humanity, what we should be moving away from. And during that time, like if you think of Capricorn energy, we are getting a very strong message to move away from things to do with control, things to do with big business, big amalgamated business, one structure meets all. It's really a huge collective message to be very, very wary of a one corporate size fits all kind of solution. And if we think about where the South Node was before it got into the sign of Capricorn, it was in the sign of Aquarius. Now, this is saying that leading up to us needing to leave the corporate sphere, we were being urged to move back away from being a faceless number, being part of an online community, but like being almost like automated to the point where we cease being a person. So there's this kind of sweep that has been warning us against anonymity and warning us against anonymity within a corporate scheme. And now the South Node is going to be going into the sign of Sagittarius on the 6th of May. And it's going to be there until the 18th of January 2022. Now, as it moves into the South Node in Sagittarius, you have to think about what is Sagittarius known for on a large scale. And Sagittarius is ruled by the planet Jupiter. So the South Node is picking up on the symbolisms of Jupiter, Sagittarius, and it's in particular the ninth house in astrology, which, if you know about it, is about big beliefs. So we're being urged, as the nodes change sign in 2 weeks' time, we're being urged to move away from big belief systems, the church. We're being urged to move away from adherence to the law. And I'm not saying we should all be lawless, but what I'm saying is that what we're urged to move away from is also going hand in hand with what we're being moved to rejoin with. And at the same time as this, as we're being urged to move away from like governance, belief systems, church ideas, law ideas, the idea of celebrity, and all these kind of big characters that seem to characterize our life. It's almost like Sagittarius is a very big sign, and Jupiter is the planet of excess and growth and optimism, and it's often, you know, hugely optimistic. Jupiter is quite a teenage sign. It doesn't seem to really grow up. It's fascinated by trends. It's fascinated by what's new, and you know what's, you know, like what's trending. You know, when people say, oh, it's on trend, you know, it's a real kind of Sagittarian phrase. And when we think about what's on trend, we're thinking like, who's the celebrity that we're allowing to dictate to us? Years ago, it wasn't celebrities. It might have been people that seem to be a specialist in something. You know, like when I was growing up, I'm 45 now. So, you know, maybe when I was 10 or 12, people would say, who do you want to be when you're older? Or who do you want to be like? And we weren't really talking about celebrities. Sure, I wanted to date Adam and the Ants, but, you know, and had a thing for Lamal, but men in makeup, full stop, used to really do it for me as a small child. But, you know, like we used to actually also think about people who might have been in a spiritual realm or in a scientific realm, or people that did something really quite specialist and really did something. And we were really impressed by these big belief system type gestures. So Jupiter rules law. It rules the church. It rules religion. It also rules spirituality and how that can take over. It rules trends, fashions, and celebrity, and in particular specialism. And if I think about my own life so far, from my education, like Sagittarius, the 9th house is all about higher education. You must go into higher education. You must go to university. If you want to be somebody who does well, you have to study for it. So there's been a real emphasis on education and going for it in a very formal way, because people are dazzled by the letters at the back of your name. You know, people are dazzled by the kind of magic that is captured by somebody who is a specialist. Now, let me backtrack a little bit. So the North Node, by you know, in conjunction with what's going on with the South Node. So the South Node, where we've just been, has been in Capricorn, and we've been urged away from big business. And at the same time as we've been urged away from big business, the North Node's been going through the sign of Cancer, urging us to reconnect at home, urging us to go back inside ourselves, go back to the start of our story, go back to our childhood, look at what we learned in our childhood, reconnect with it, retell our story from a new narrative. That's what's been going on for us collectively. We've been urged to connect back into the home. Many of us have started working from home in that time. In the last 18 months, home working has shot through the roof, and people coming out of the office is a thing of the past, throwing it over my shoulder. And, you know, office working from home is becoming more popular. People are doing it for themselves. Now, as the North Node moves from the sign of Cancer and into the sign of Gemini, we realize why we've been urged to go back into the home. And that is because we need to reconnect with our communities. And would we be able to do that if we hadn't already worked on what was going on at home? Would we be able to do that if we didn't have an appreciation of where our childhood and our home and our early communities and early environments had led us to? Probably not. So we've been in a phase of trying to build trust or work on gaining trust in the last 18 months or so. And it's leading us to the North Node in Gemini. And ta-da, the North Node in Gemini is about community, communication, education. So Gemini then is ruled by Mercury. And Mercury, as you know, is one of those fast-moving planets. It's small, really super fast, also known as Hermes. He's a deliverer. He's a delivery guy, a cosmic delivery guy. So he's delivering information. He's delivering packages and parcels of knowledge or resources. He's a trader. You know, he's to do with sales and things. You know, Mercury is a very interesting character, and where our Mercury shows up in our chart shows how we like to engage and communicate with people. So we've got this emphasis to do with communication. We're moving into an 18-month cycle where humanity is being tested to communicate in a new way. And so not only is communication important, but our communities. Now, if you're a Gemini, you've probably had people say that you're kind of a jack of all trades. You tend to be interested in lots of little things rather than one big thing. That's the kind of, you know, the Sagittarian and Gemini polarity is about knowledge. And like Gemini represents the early school kind of learning, you know, the kind of where you learn facts. You need to know a little bit of everything, but you don't need to know it too in depth. And then Sagittarius is like turning that information into knowledge, you know, where you take that fact, but actually put it into context and say what it means. So what the North Node and South Node are saying at the moment is, as they move into the signs of Sagittarius and Gemini, is we need to move away from the context and the actual knowledge and experience and go back to this early learning stage. We need to be relearning our facts, because a lot of the stuff that we've learned in the past or accepted culturally isn't necessarily fit for purpose in these times, isn't necessarily true. If you think about Gemini, it's the twins. In fact, Sagittarius is a double sign as well, because it's half animal, half kind of centaur, you know, like a half human god, you know. So you've got these two symbols of duality. So there is a very strong need to work out what is true and what is false. So this can be interesting. So the North Node is heading into the sign of Gemini. It's ruling communication, community, and education. And like I said, the education is early learning stuff, like the fundamental learning, not knowing everything in depth. We need to relearn all the fundamentals. And that's going to be a challenge, because most people these days are an expert in their own right. You know, if we think about the kinds of work people have been doing for a long, long time, you know, we've been separated, you know, like nobody does the whole picture of anything anymore, you know, like when my parents went to work, they owned their whole job. So they needed to know a bit of accounting. They needed to know a bit about how things might have been manufactured or brought to market. They might have needed to know a little bit about marketing and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And they'd have been involved in the whole process. And of course, in the space of my lifetime, work has been narrowed down. And so you do a very tiny bit of the workflow. And in that, you become an expert in this one thing. But what we're realizing is having all these experts in just one thing at a time without the use of having other skills that are kind of relate in, that you can rely on, or without knowing a man who can fill in the gaps of your knowledge that you have deep trust with. You know, we've been educated out of learning all the things we need to know and just focusing on one thing and becoming almost like a celebrity in our own right in our field. You know, we've become the law of the thing that we do. We've become the church. We've become the governor of our bit. And astrology, represented by the North Node, is urging humanity to reskill and go back. Like, we need to go back to school. In the birth chart, Gemini is the natural ruler of the third house. And the third house in your chart represents your early education and the environment that you grew up in, how you featured within your community and how you learnt to communicate. And so for some people, if they've got a really busy third house, it's usually indicative that they had quite a big family, lots of siblings, lots of cousins, lots of busyness in their early environment. And possibly they were very, very busy in the school days, with the best days of their life and stuff. Third house is really important. Now, if we think about what's the modern day equivalent of our third house, well, it's where we get lots of information from. It's where we're busy, and it's where we're forming our community. So communities is important because we're moving into a time where Jupiter and Jupiter and Saturn are moving into the sign of Aquarius this year. Saturn's already there, is about to retrograde out, and we'll come back later on in December. we've got this theme of moving towards Aquarius. And by the end of the year, things, whatever is online is almost going to be amplified. Our roles and our responsibilities and our relationship to the internet and the web and the communities within the web are going to get revised. And during this 18-month period, that's really, really going to be important to us as we work out who is our community. Is it our community locally? Is it our community online? Who's our tribe? So we're going to have all these kinds of questions coming up for us, which is going to be interesting. My overall feeling about this is we need to have many types of communities to survive as a human race. So it's not as clear cut as saying you just need to connect to your local environment. Like, I'm sat in a community that I've not grown up in. I moved to this small town in a small, lovely place in Portugal with my family about a year ago. And we are not part of the community. We know some of the faces. We say hello to people. We try and buy locally. Obviously, we can't at the moment with the quarantine. And we try to do the best, like baking bread and stuff for the neighbors. And they've been giving us stuff. So we're building our resources. We're building our social capital. Social is a real Gemini word. We're building our social capital with them. But if we rely just on our local communities, we're also missing another trick. We need to have communities outside of our local community. Like, where are other communities? Our other communities might be our online communities, our family networks, which might be not in the town we're living in, but further afield. So this is an 18-month period where we are rebuilding our communities, and this is the big thing, where we need to listen to what's going on within our communities and learn from other communities. So the time for specialism we're moving away from, and the time of us reskilling. So this is an opportunity for us to share what we're good at with the people around us, whether it's our online communities or our local ones. So, for instance, you know, I'm not the best plant grower. My neighbor, Adriana, is fantastic. She works on a farm. She has a farm. She grew up on a farm. So she knows all about growing. That's her specialty, and she can share that with me. Now, I'm not so good at that. However, I'm pretty good at researching stuff about new seeds and this, that, and the other. So we have areas where we can share and help each other, you know, and this is going on all the time. But if we sit in our little silos, nothing's going to change. And if there's something that this quarantine is showing us is what we thought of as safety can be taken away from us at a moment's notice. So for those of you that, or for those of us, because we, you know, although I didn't really believe so much in the system, I had a slight kind of, you know, reliance on it. You know, I wasn't completely detached from, you know, the world. You know, I'm still living in it, you know, but when you live in the world and you accept the structures that are given to you, if you believe in those structures and don't do anything for yourself, you could become a cropper. I imagine a lot of people who are preppers, I imagine a lot of people that have already felt the karmic call to get back into their communities and communicate and grow and do things locally, have probably fared a lot better than the people who have been cut off from people and who are used to traveling to work, not seeing their neighbors, you know. So there's a very strong need to, now we're back in our families, and we really are now, given that we're in our quarantines. Now we're back in our home environment. We absolutely need to rejoin the community. And that's what the North Node is really saying. Now, given that the North Node's in Gemini and the South Node's in Sagittarius, we need to also consider the rulers of those star signs. So Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So whenever Mercury does something a little bit interesting, i.e. going retrograde, that is going to have extra significance during this 18-month time. So I've just got a message from Owen. He's saying sharing skill sets is about the best builders of community. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. And you said it so much better. Thank you, Owen. So yeah, sharing our skill sets is what builds a community. And the more we do it, the more our communities get built. So thank you so much for that. I'm going to leave that up for a bit. Yeah, so when Mercury goes retrograde, it's going to have extra significance because it's going to be working in conjunction with the North Node. The North Node is about us getting back into our communities, about us communicating, and about education. This is interesting, isn't it? Because recently education's been turned on its head. You know, for years, decades now, it has seemed the most appropriate thing to do is to send your children to school. And by and large, that's the system that most people have bought into, and that's the system that most people believe in. However, in our global society, we've realized that there are some flaws, and we've realized what that has also meant. So, you know, as a lot of families currently are getting used to the idea of spending more time with their children, we're learning more about how separated we've become from our children. And we're also learning how relevant that information that they're learning at school really is. So all things to do with education are being turned on their head right now and are due for a rethink. And especially when Mercury goes retrograde, the education aspect is going to be rethought of. You know, there's going to be another kind of bombshell landing where we think, okay, there's more learning for us to do. So yeah, interesting times. Now, when we factor in working environments, education, I heard someone say that we have, I think it's something like our structure for education was set in the 1900s or in the 19th century. We're teaching stuff from the 20th century and we're educating people for the 21st century. And without taking away from any teacher out there or anyone involved in educating, what strikes true for me is that the job market and life is moving faster than education. Now consider that for a moment. You know, that children are going to school from the age of 5 or earlier, actually, in some instances. You know, they're going into daycare or whatever, and they're being educated. Their minds are being filled with ideas as to what we need to survive right now. But by the time they come out of school, aged 18 or possibly 21 if they're going to university, or even later if they're going to become some kind of specialist, the fields that they're being trained in are already possibly a decade out of date because things are moving at such a speed that we just cannot keep up. So we need to think now, who are our experts and who should our children be listening to? Who should they be taught by? Is teaching them with teachers in a classroom the actual ideal? You know, lots of people have been doing forest school, some have been doing homeschool, some do, you know, unschooling. There's so many different ways of educating your children. I think that is opening wide up and it's open for discussion. And this is the thing: community, communication, education, it's about discussion. So education is going to be turned on its side. And when the Mercury goes retrograde, it's going to have some big effects. Now, Mercury is going retrograde on the 17th of June this year, which is going to be the first challenge, I think. So from mid-June right the way through to mid-July, I think that's going to be one of our first stumbling blocks, where a lot of information comes out at the same time that is forcing us all to re-step and retrace our thinking and think, okay, that's interesting. My whole life has been premised on this set of informations and this set of rules and ideas coming from the idea of the South Node in Sagittarius, the thing that we're moving away from. So all those governors and churches and schools and celebrities and everyone that's telling us what we need to do, you know, everyone coming at us. We're realizing actually that we need to find the wisdom within and find the wisdom that is appropriate for our actual communities. Now, when Jupiter goes retrograde, that is also going to have a knock-on effect. And Jupiter is going retrograde. Got it written down here somewhere. Is going retrograde on the 14th of May. So this month, in May 2020, he's going retrograde right the way through to the end of September, pretty much. And during that time, the experts that I'm talking about, represented by Sagittarius, are going to be deeply questioned. So it really looks to me like as the North Node goes into the sign of Gemini, there's going to be an unlocking of information. And a lot of the codes and ideas that we've taken as read and we've believed and we've based our culture on are either going to be found to be false or possibly completely untrue. Or, and this is me being kind of sitting on the fence, we're realizing that actually they're outdated and there is a real need for us to update our thinking, update our operating systems. Where is this heading? Well, after this, this is going on to the 18th of January 2022. When that happens, the North Node and South Node are transitioning across the Scorpio and Taurus polarity. As we're heading into Taurus, we're being pulled further into our communities and back into nature, back into love, back into communion with each other. We're being pulled back into the place of resources, so personal resource, personal wealth, feeling like we have resources. So if we do this community thing right, if we connect to our communities, if we communicate, if we're open to communicating, and if we allow ourselves to be re-educated at a fundamental level, by the time the node swings around into Taurus, we will be so much wealthier, so much more in communion with others, and so much more in nature, just because that's where we actually want to be. We realize that we are part of nature. We are of nature. We are not above nature. We are nature. And so that's where we're heading. And we're moving away from the things represented by the Scorpio kind of energy of it's me against the world. It's about sexual greed, dysfunction, power. I'm not saying Scorpios are like that, but it's all the sort of energy represented by Pluto. And it's not about other people's wealth. It's about all of us feeling wealthy. So this is going to be really interesting. If we play this 18 months right, or however long it is, it's not quite 18 months. If we play this North Node in Gemini right and move away from those experts and stop listening to them like they are God, if we stop listening to them like they are the word, if we start learning from people who actually do know something locally within our communities, and if we allow others to be heard, we also will be heard. If we share all this and learn in this way and open our minds wide to the new ways of thinking, then we will be in a truly magical place to connect into nature by 2022. So anyway, that is a little bit of my thinking around the North Node and South Node. If you want to explore how it changes in your own chart, then it's really, really worth doing. As an example, for instance, like if in your chart, your ascendant is in the sign of Gemini or Sagittarius, then this is going to be a pretty big time for you, because the North Node and South Node are crossing over your ascendant and your descendant. It's going to really be impacting your concept of how you are in the world, how you show up, and also how much influence other people have over you. So where it falls in your own chart is really indicative of what's going on for you. Right now, the North Node, for me, has been in the sign of beliefs. And also during this last period has also been in the signs of transitioning into another time of my life, like moving from one side of life to another. It's about that transition. The North Node now is moving towards closer and closer towards relationships for me. And my South Node is moving closer and closer, edging all the time closer into my self-concept. And this is really this is more about me reaching out to more people and being less insular. So there is always a message going on when you compare it to your own charts. And also for those of you that are born with a Sagittarian node or a Gemini node, this is going to have even stronger connections for you. This is your time where you can really move forward in your karma and let go of some really persistent patterns. Anyway, if you do want to explore that, I'm very happy to look at your charts with you. Or you can go to astro.com, and you can actually build your own charts, which I highly recommend, and that will give you a little bit of a heads up. I've also done a podcast about the North Node and South Node through the houses. So if you go to Spotify and you type in feelgoodastrology.com and have a look at the North Node series, you'll actually see if you know where your ascendant is and know, which houses are where, you will be able to see where it is currently for you and what you might expect to happen. So it's really quite useful. It gives you a heads up on where your focus might want to be definitely over the next year and a little bit beyond that. Anyway, lots of love to you. Have a fantastic weekend wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Lots of love. Thank you very much, Owen. Wishing me a great weekend. Lots of love to you from Portugal to wherever you are in the world. Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.